Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have a layout that I made using the August My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. For this layout, I'm going to use one of the My Creative Scrapbook cut files. The cut file says Weekend Away, and right now I'm working on the letters that I'm going to back the cut file with. I cut out each of these letters by hand and I cut them out of one of the pattern papers that was in the kit. I'm using the stencil that was in the kit and some Distress Oxide to make some patterns on the letters. I didn't necessarily want them to look like leaf patterns. I like that curvy line pattern that the stencil had, so that was my goal, to add some lines to the letters. I go over a lot of the letters more than once. The first time I applied the Distress Oxide, I wasn't worried so much about the center, I guess, vein in the leaf showing up, but I noticed that when I had included that line, it made the letters look like they were covered with a leaf design. And like I said, I didn't want it to look like a leaf. I wanted to look more just like some lines. So I went back in with the Distress Oxide and I tried to cover up that center line whenever I could. And I believe that by the end, the letters just look like they have the lines in them. I started off by using the Distress Oxide in Bundled Sage, and then afterwards I added a little bit of peeled paint. Peeled paint has a little bit more yellow in it than the Bundled Sage, and I like the idea of having more than one color on the letters. I just think that it makes them look a little more interesting. I cut this large circle out of one of the pattern papers. To ink the edges of this large circle, and then also some other ephemera pieces that I wanted to include on the layout, I used Distress Oxide in Weathered Wood. I'm not really sure which of the embellishments I'm going to use, but I knew that I wanted to include some layering pieces, and I thought I might include a subtitle, and then I was thinking I would use some tickets as well. After I had inked all of those items with the gray color, I decided that I wanted to make the edges look a little darker. They just didn't look quite as dark as I had pictured, so I went back in with some black soot and I inked the edges with the black soot as well. Now I'm making kind of a border for my layout. I'm using one of the Bow Bunny papers that we got in this month's kit. I'm piecing together a frame. I had to be careful with this particular pattern because of the way there are letters on it. I wanted all the letters to be upright. It would be fine to have some of the letters sideways, but I decided that I wanted to have them all upright. So I attached two pieces of paper in rectangular strips on the two sides, and then I cut two strips of paper with 45-degree angles in the corner, and then I'm going to attach those down, and that makes a nice frame for the layout. And if you've been with me for a while, you may know that I like to use this technique for various reasons. Sometimes it's to conserve paper, and other times it is because I want to have the letters or the stripes or whatever the pattern paper has on it going a certain way, and then I can manipulate that by cutting the paper into strips. I put a black piece of cardstock on top of the frame that I just made, and then I use another piece of pattern paper from the collection. I cut it a little bit smaller so that there would be a small border of black behind it. You may have noticed there is a circle cut out of the black cardstock. That's because I cut out a circle and I'm going to be layering that over all of these pattern papers in a moment. So I have the black mat, and then I have that gray piece of paper that I inked the edges of earlier. So for a minute I wasn't sure if I should use the gray side or the printed side, but I decided to use the gray side. And then I attached that down right in the center of the layout. I wanted the cut file to stand out against the background, and I thought with the white edge it would kind of blend in with that gray paper that I had as the circle in the center of the page. So I cut a slight offset on my Silhouette Cameo, and now I'm using some Distress Oxide in Faded Jeans. I'm covering any of the areas that will be seen once the cut file is put on top of it. I actually didn't realize how much of the right-hand side of the offset would be visible through the cut file. So when I layered it on top, I realized I had to fill in that whole area on the right, and I think that this bold color will really help the cut file to kind of pop off the page. And you can see that I used those green letters that I made earlier to back the cut file. I also used some of the other pattern papers that were in the kit. And then I used some embroidery thread in different colors that I thought went along with the colors in the layout. And I did some stitching on all of the letters that make up the word weekend. I'm really branching out lately. I normally only use white embroidery thread, but I thought that I would start trying to mix it up a little bit. And so for this layout, I have all different color threads, and those are going to match the tickets that I'm going to put on the layout in a little bit. This is the photo that I'm using. This is a really old photo of both of my daughters. We went to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We were at a hotel. We got there really late, but we decided to go for a swim. And I was really glad the pool was open. Usually these hotels close the pool really early, but we did get a swim in. And when my kids were little, that's all they really cared about was going in the pool. So I remember always making sure that whatever hotel we went to had a pool for them to swim in. I have a number of papers layered behind my photo. These are some layering pieces that were included in the kit. In order to make my photo stand out a little bit, I mounted it on some white cardstock and then again on some black cardstock, and then put those layered papers behind the photo. Here you can see that off camera I switched out those more neutral colored layering pieces for a little more colorful yellow and red pieces. I wanted to include some blue because I have blue behind the cut file. I wanted to bring some over to the photo cluster, so I took one of the layering pieces and then I used the faded jeans and I colored it blue, and then I tucked that in behind the photo, and I think that helped to balance out that cluster a little bit. I also wanted to bring a little bit more color to a chipboard heart, so I used some Distress Oxide in Abandoned Coral. I inked the heart and then I placed it underneath the word away. Also, it did not record when I added those little buttons. There are some gray buttons going around the outside of the circle. Those were from the chipboard sheet in the kit. Somehow I ripped the paper in the background under the letter Y. I don't recall how I did that, but luckily I had a plan of adding a number of tickets on two sides of the circle. I thought that the tickets would go really well with the travel theme of this layout, so I distributed them to try to have at least one of each color on both sides of the circle, and I layered them together, and then I used some ATG adhesive and I attach them down to the layout. I added a red tab on top of the photo. That's going to be for the date. This photo was taken in 2015, and I'm glad that when we went on vacations or away, anytime we went in a hotel, or even sometimes if we were away for a whole day, I would take some notes, do some journaling, and then type it up, and then I include that in the album. So luckily, I don't have to worry that I'm scrapbooking it so far from the date that it took place, but there are some times that I don't do that journaling, and then I wait a long time to scrapbook, and then I'm trying to get everybody to give me their input on what they remember about the day. And that's definitely not as effective as writing things down right after they happen. I love reading the old journals of vacations we've gone on in the past. There's so many things that I would have forgotten and things that my kids said and did that I never would have remembered. So I do think the journaling is really important, and I just have to be a little more consistent about it. I had a little butterfly and I thought that it would look nice sitting on top of the letter D, so I popped it up on two pieces of fun foam. I attached that down. And then I wanted to add a little bit of green to the photo cluster. There's a lot of green on the layout, but none in the photo cluster. So again, I cut a small piece off of one of the layering pieces or the layering cards. I used some Distress Oxide to change the color to green, and then I added it to the left side of the photo. I used a stamp and I included the date on that tab, and then I added yet another little piece of paper on the top of the photo cluster to add to the layering. Now I'm covering up my photo so that I could add some white splatters to the layout, and I mainly looking to get them around the outside, around the background, on the tickets, but I'm okay with the splatters going anywhere except, of course, on my photo. For these splatters, I'm using some watered down white acrylic paint. And I find that if I don't like the way the splatters look, if I wipe them away right away, very, very carefully, usually I can get rid of them. Especially if the background is gessoed, then it's very easy to remove splatters. I allowed the splatters to dry before I continued to work on the layout so that I did not smear them. And then I punched out 2 photo corners from one of the papers in the collection, and I added those to the 2 top corners of the photo. In the lower left-hand corner, I'm adding a couple of sentiments. One says live in the now, one says moments, and one says wander and wonder more. There was also a little button, and I added some foam to the bag to just punch it up a little bit. I have all of these elements inked on the edges with the Distress ink in black soot. To add a finishing touch to the photo corners, I added a medium-sized black dot, and then I added a very tiny one to the chipboard heart. Sometimes when I'm working with a cut file, I handle it so much and I use glue, and sometimes parts of it get discolored. And here I'm painting some Dr. P.H. Martin's Pro White on top of it, and this just helps the cut file to look a little bit more fresh. And I found this Pro White to be really helpful in covering up a number of different mistakes that occur as I'm scrapbooking. So that completes this layout, everybody. Here are a few close-ups. I can't thank you enough for watching this video, and thank you for watching it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for every view, every like, every comment. I really greatly appreciate every single one of them, and thank you so much for all of your support. If you would like to look at this month's My Creative Scrapbook kits, you could check out the link. It's in the description box. I hope that everybody has a fantastic day, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.